Younger when the NBA regular season ended. Tonight, they will finally name this year's MVP. And Jalen, here's Hembo's question. If James Harden wins that award, he would be the third player to average 35 points in an MVP season. Who were the first two?
I'm a little disappointed in you, Hembo, because as a basketball historian since 1973, there aren't many people that first and foremost get a chance to average 35 points in the league. Okay, so that sounds like James Harden and Michael Jordan and Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain, guys like that. So that makes my answer a lot easier. So that makes it the guy that Greeny knows that I feel like should have his own record book, which is?
Wilt Chamberlain.
And Michael Jordan.
That's correct. He got it right. He did get it right. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came very close. Bob McAdoo came very close, but only those two on the screen averaged 35 points in an MVP season. Meanwhile, the free agent who we're all keeping our eyes on as July 1st approaches is a guy who will not play next year, and that's Kevin Durant. He's heard his name connected with Brooklyn, with the Knicks, with the Warriors on a 5-year deal with a promise they'd trade him wherever he wanted to go next year. But none of it really matters until his former teammate Kendrick Perkins weighs in.
I think it's time for KD to move on. It's like I said, it's always going to be Steph's team. I think it's time for him to move on, have his own team, be able to call Kevin Durant team and carry his own team. And actually, he's moving into the East now. So you can move into the East because we don't know what Kawhi's going to do.
Funny you should mention that.
And it could be a strong possibility. You come back healthy, more stronger, and
you're the guy in the East. There you go.
I was fascinated as watching that interview by the way he phrased that. He is going to the East. Not he would be going to the East or he might be going to the East. Kendrick Perkins, who knows KD very well, they're very good friends. And if you didn't see it, he lost his mind that KD played at all in that Game 5. Perk was very upset about it.
Neutral.
He's saying, he's talking about it like it is a done deal that KD is going to East. But do you agree with the premise that he needs to have his own team where he is clearly 1A in order to fulfill whatever it is we're talking about?
I don't necessarily agree with the premise because I talked about a herd mentality, in my opinion, that led to Kevin Durant actually getting injured. If the Golden State Warriors were up 3-1, I don't think he comes back. But because of public pressure and people questioning his manhood and his commitment to the team, I think that forced him back into the lineup, and we know what ended up happening. He got injured. And I know how this works. Kendrick Perkins, who's doing a terrific job with us in his rookie year, is the latest to say it. But we've been talking about this all year, that KD's not only leaving, but he's going to the East. So I still feel like that's going to happen. I still feel like it's going to happen with the Knicks.
You said this to me a year ago, when Swagoo and I first met, about a year ago this time he started coming up here. And here's my response. You said KD needs his own place. Yeah. I feel two ways about that, and I feel two things that contradict that. One of them is I think that the narrative changes based upon what he just did.
Correct.
The fact that he came back and put all this on the line. You're right, he wasn't come back if they're 3-1 up. He came back 3-1 down because he's trying to help them win a championship for them and for himself. So I think if people don't respect that, then you're never going to respect anything about him. Two, if indeed the herd mentality and public pressure sort of convinced him to do something that wasn't in his own best interest, maybe that will be the best opportunity to say, you know what, once and for all, I need to ignore what everyone else thinks and just do what's best for me. And maybe what's best for him is staying on a really good team in Golden State. Just maybe.
When you look at Kevin Durant, all right, and when you think about what he's done in basketball, no one has ever questioned that, right? Coming back from an injury is what superstars do. We understand that as well. I was one that sat here and said he shouldn't have played,
Yes,
period.
you did.
But with that being said, when we talk about Kevin Durant's legacy and his history, when we compare him to, we've had the conversation of Kevin Durant possibly being on the Mount Rushmore of basketball. Name me one player up there that didn't have their own franchise. That somebody says these guys they had their own team, they took their team to championships. Now, from a basketball standpoint, we understand that Golden State Warriors are not who they are without Kevin Durant on the floor. But from a psychological standpoint and where we go after Kevin Durant retires from the NBA, will we ever say that Kevin Durant took his team to a championship?
But as players, you have to be careful with this his team stuff. Because I played against Michael Jordan when he was a member of the Wizards. I played for the Pacers when Larry Bird was the coach and we returned to Boston. I saw Isaiah Thomas end up being an owner and work with the Raptors. So that's just a conversation for public consumption. The reality of it is when he joined the Golden State Warriors, he didn't just become a bandwagon player, a 9th, 10th guy that got a championship because he averaged 5 points. Like, he shot LeBron James down and won back-to-back finals
Jay,
MVP.
that ain't what we saying.
That validated it.
Let me ask you a question. You a Pistons fan. Who team was it?
Isaiah and Joe.
No, it was Isaiah's.
It was Isaiah's
The world
team.
will always remember it as
Chicago,
Isaiah's team.
Chicago 6 championships, whose team
It
was
was
it?
Michael's, of course.
And
LeBron
Scott.
teams in Cleveland.
Your point is, yeah, we get the point, yeah.
But that's how, my point is, that's how we want to talk about KD. And people get mad at the people like myself that says, well, who do we say that about? How do we say that about KD?
But you ready for this? But here's what ends up happening when you have a level of success. You get a chance to sparse it, meaning I played against Kobe when he won 3 championships playing with Shaq.
Right.
The ones he appreciates the most is the ones without Shaq.
And so maybe that's the perfect...
It's always going to be that.
That might be the perfect place to leave it, that Kobe and Shaq could not coexist because they couldn't make up their mind whose team it was going to be. We'll continue to talk about this, but I got enough stuff to do today. We are 73 days until the kickoff of the NFL season, and let us dive directly into Odell Beckham Jr., who seems to be very pleased with his change of scenery. He did an interview with a magazine called Complex, and he explained that he was not able to reach his ceiling with the New York Giants. Quote, I felt like I wasn't going to be able to reach my full potential there. Mentally, physically, spiritually, everything I felt capable of doing, I just couldn't see it happening there. So I think allowing me to be in an environment where I can be myself and give it a different approach, I feel like my football will benefit. I'm just excited about being able to play football again and not have to deal with all the other stuff and politics that came with my previous role. Swagoo, he's an LSU guy. You're an LSU guy. You know him well. What do you make of this?
Let's go through the lineage first before we have this conversation, because I know what a lot of people are going to say. Well, you got the money. You had success in New York. But I remember watching Odell on The Shop, and that's LeBron's series on HBO. And he talked about feeling like a zoo animal in this New York market. Outside of football, I'm not talking about on the field. Like everywhere he went, he was on display. He felt like everything that he did, every conversation revolved around Odell Beckham outside of football. Now, when we go to the field, there is no place to go in America in football that gets you just about football than Cleveland, Ohio. That is the only thing to do as a football player in Cleveland, Ohio. So I understand where he's coming from, even though he embraced all of that lifestyle that New York had to bring and benefited majorly off of it monetarily and his status in the world as far as meeting people and being a part of that culture. But I understand what he's saying about going to Cleveland.
This happened great for Odell because he got all of the fame, all of the notoriety, and all of the hype playing in New York City earlier in his career. So therefore, making a one-hand catch against the Dallas Cowboys is like happening in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay, it's big stage. But also, New York City closes at 5 a.m. Cleveland closes at 2 a.m. If you don't make the playoffs in New York City, it's a big deal. Before this year, if you didn't make the playoffs in Cleveland, other than the Browns fans, nationally, it wasn't a big deal. He's had multiple GMs. He's had a couple of coaches. He's had a couple of coordinators, and he has an aging quarterback in Eli Manning.
Okay, Mark Eisman, our producer, I apologize in advance. I'm going to blow through the next thing we're going to talk about.
Yes.
Okay? I have a problem with this, okay? 2 problems. First off, all of this notoriety and all of this off-the-field stuff did not seek Odell Beckham out. He sought it out. He loved it. He wanted to be a part of it. And he wanted to be a star as much as he wanted to be a football player. And I don't care what anybody says. And that isn't a question of how much he loves football. I'm sure he does. And I've heard that a million times from you and from Ryan Clark and all these other LSU guys who know him well. I'm not questioning that. But I'm saying the part about being a star, he definitely sought out every bit as much as it sought him out. Secondly, the New York Giants, and I say this with no bias, I'm not a Giant fan, everyone knows that. You couldn't bend over backwards more for a player than they bent over for him, and that includes Tom Coughlin, the most militaristic football coach that we've ever had, who somehow allowed him to get away with anything and everything, wouldn't bench him to save his life, wouldn't take him out of the game when he almost killed Josh Norman.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Go ahead.
His talent afforded him to stay out there. Tom Coughlin ain't stupid.
Tom Coughlin has taken good players off the field to tell them you're either going to play the way you're supposed to play or not.
Show me the players that had more impact on the New York Giants winning at that time than Odell Beckham Jr. had.
I'm not suggesting they didn't. I'm suggesting he's saying he wasn't able to reach his full potential. Well, who was stopping him?
The culture.
Which
Just like the Giants said they needed to change their culture by getting him out of the locker room, Odell Beckham felt like he needed to leave New York in order to become the guy. This is an evolution. Like, everybody talks about Odell Beckham embracing the New York lifestyle. Wouldn't you? If people if Anna Wintour is inviting you to the Met Gala and you 21, 22 years old and you this prolific guy on the NFL field, you're going to take all of those opportunities.
Did Eli Manning do that?
No.
Or did Eli Manning put his head down and become a great player and then worry about all the stuff that came with it?
Eli Manning came from a family that went through this process long before he did.
Should Sam Darnold do it?
And he understood. No, but that's not his personality. Odell Beckham has personality, so you play into that. There's a lot of guys in the NFL that wants to go to the New York market because they know it benefits you long after you get done playing. I played with Chris Canty, who left and signed the deal with the New York Giants, and now is host of a radio show here in New York. Michael Strahan left the New York Giants and arguably has the greatest media career than any former football player. So there's a difference when you come and play in this market. Odell Beckham was able to capture that from a football standpoint. When he said he wasn't able to grow, I think the organization and what was happening with him in this city just became two conflicting things.
And also, we can't cover this Odell Beckham move like he asked to be traded. They traded him. And one of the things that he talked about is the politics. And we just talked about this with R.J. Barrett. These are things that have nothing to do with wins and losses. We're talking about the attitude of people that follow the Giants, that follow the Knicks, that are starving for a winner. He feels like going to Cleveland, easing himself into the season, just like Zion, easing himself into the season gives him a best opportunity to maximize his potential.
But, G, on which this doesn't, look, this conversation doesn't absolve Odell Beckham Jr. from the mistakes that he made. He understands that. But I also need people to recognize that when he says that he's going to reach his full potential in Cleveland, for a football guy that's been in these locker rooms, that saw Adam Pac-Man Jones come to Dallas into an environment of a bunch of veteran guys and was able to talk to him and speak to him, and he becomes a better player and goes to Cincinnati and has a career, and even though he's still making some crazy decisions, the environment sometimes, the change in the culture is what you need in order to just hone in on football. I don't think he felt like
it worked out perfect from Odell. He got the New York fame. Now he can go to Cleveland and play his best football.
Well, hopefully he'll be able to reach his full potential. Okay, we'll take our first time out. That's our second fight. Swagoo and I just had our second fight. Coming up, he dominated the NBA 2 decades ago. So how would Michael Jordan play today? You'll hear what Dennis Rodman had to say. We'll explain why he was exactly right. And the MVP will be awarded tonight. How did Jalen Rose cast his vote? You'll find out later this morning. Stay with us. It's Get Up on ESPN.
If he ain't reached his full potential, when he do, he gonna be the best to ever do it. Man. You do look good today, Jay.